I'm just gonna discuss this week's content, which seemed to focus on sexuality and also the discrimination of people who don't identify with the norm. I will be discussing Gail Rubin's article, Thinking Sex, and also Juno Mac's TED Talk on the laws that sex workers really want. In the article, Rubin discussed the discrimination of sexual minorities and the criminalization of sex work, sex acts, and sexual orientation of certain individuals. The article starts off with a quote which details the treatment that some young girls had to endure when they were caught exploring their sexuality. And I think this was a really great way to start off the conversation about how women and children's bodies have been controlled throughout history. She also talks about in this article how homosexuals were haunted, arrested, and even killed, and the government's involvement in it all. I think the government should be held accountable in some way for their role in legalized discrimination of homosexuals to the point where they were killed. So I think that, yes, we have come a long way now with a lot of the LGBTQ rights. It doesn't excuse sexual persecution by our own government. The TED Talk, I felt it was very thought-provoking. Sex work, to me, has always been a negative thing. I've always thought of it as something that was bad. Before reading this week's content and watching this TED Talk, I never thought about the fact that maybe I got this negative perception because I've been influenced by the media and the government to believe that it's wrong. And that just shows another way that the government and media influence our social thoughts. So I could never imagine a world where prostitution would be legal, but the claims made by Mac about it, I understood some of the claims that she made. I think the criminal justice system is somewhat corrupt in that it's not really set up to benefit anyone. It doesn't benefit anyone except the people that are making money off of prisoners being in prison. For example, this was emphasized in the TED Talk when she discussed how sex work being illegal sets them up to have to continue in the field. And that happens because once they're arrested for prostitution, they now have a criminal record, and it's really hard to find a job in the United States with a criminal record. So therefore, you started off doing something because you needed the money, and now you can't get out of it because you are considered a criminal in the eyes of the government. And I think that this can apply to multiple aspects of life and multiple problems with the criminal justice system. And this brings me to my comment. I want to comment on Riley's vlog number 5. She brought up the question of whether the legalization of sex work would ultimately end up reinforcing the negative patriarchal views on women that we fight so hard to stray from. And I think that there's no way to say for sure how things would turn out until or unless it becomes legal. But I think that I do agree that it would reinforce the negative views of women that we are trying to stray away from. But I also could definitely agree. But I also do agree with some of the points presented in the TED Talk about why it would be beneficial to make it legal, just because it would provide the workers with regulation and some form of protection under the law. So I think this week was a week full of some interesting content, and I learned a lot. I look forward to seeing you guys, talking with you guys in my next vlog.